female rogue or whatever, and then suddenly it's like thousands of darkspawn and they're exploding when you hit them. Like, you haven't picked your decks or anything, and yet you're mauling through these guys. And then what you find is right away the story's kind of torn apart. This Inquisitor character is like, bullshit, that's not what really happened. And then you get to see the reality. And I think what we're doing there is I mean, from a gameplay standpoint, players who are new or who are coming in from Origins and want to see the changes, they're kind of front-loaded. You're right there, you get to see, oh man, rogues leap around and explode, that's awesome. But if you're coming in, from a story standpoint, what it does is it lets you see the character you've built and kind of how people will perceive him or her, not the character from Humble Beginnings, but with the legend that's built up around them. And then we tear that down, see it. And we really hit one of what I see as the main themes of the game, which is legends are made. They're not born. Not everyone comes with a prophecy stapled to their neck. They often earn it.
And along with the
was really responsiveness. That's kind of the word in a nutshell, where we said, within a certain time of issuing an order, I should interact with that order. So if I attack, even if I'm a distance away from a guy, I should get in there and start hitting him. Well, how do we do that? Hence, closing attack. So now my rogue leaps through the air and stabs the guy with his dual daggers. Once we kind of had some mantras and some rules around how do we make combat more responsive, what came out was the idea of that whole fight like a Spartan kind of vibe, where the moves are flashier. Warriors and rogues have more than just awkward kind of slow swinging. They're now able to participate in combat in the same way a mage, who's always been able to throw fireballs, could. And so as a result, the classes are now in parity. We've got, fast, responsive, cool stuff that in a lot of ways has been scary to people. And yet, under it all, there's still tactics. There's still equipping items. There's still enchanting your stuff. There's still cross-class combos where you can freeze a guy with your mage and explode him with your two-handed sword, and so on, to make sure that the tactical depth didn't get lost. Try to say you can build your way through the trees, and adding upgrades so that you have the smaller, kind of ones that augment an existing power means that if you want, you can be a specialist. Something you honestly couldn't do. In Origins, we saw people sending in saves late game or Awakening that they had abilities that they hadn't even mapped on their bar, and they weren't using them. Okay, that's a problem. So we wanted to give players options. Do you want to be a specialist or a generalist? That's valid. And then within the upgrade system as well, you'll find those combos between the classes. I do more damage to brittle people. Oh, my mage is upgraded to make people brittle. I see how that fits. Dwarven legends, they're not real, sink the dwarves. Because obviously the dwarves have been dealing with the darkspawn for centuries. So that's a much more real threat. But the wraiths are like these amalgamations of living rock that can change forms, and physically take on forms that adjust their combat tactics. Should be behind him. And they also command vast amounts of energy. So you end up in a situation where Origins was often a kind of build your strategy and then kind of grind them down kind of strategy. The boss fights, I think, in 2 more often evolve or use the environment. So if the creature is going to explode, get behind the pillar and don't take the damage and stuff, which I think will keep people a lot more engaged, a lot more active, without falling into the trap of, I have to time the BXA, no combo system or anything like that. Instead, it's more about positioning and awareness, which to me is kind of the fundamentals of tactics.
And that kind of ties a little bit into the
it puts you behind him and you've stabbed him. Like, there you go. It's kind of a fundamental shift. I mean, Origins, you would have to circle around him, but the problem is that created a ton of, okay, well, no, now I have to circle around 3 guys because he's got guys bunched up beside him. And so you ended up in a situation where I've talked to people who played Rogues and Origins who just didn't bother. They treated them exactly like fighters, and to me, that's a failing. If the class doesn't have its own identity, visually, a satisfying kind of set of moves that make me feel like, oh man, I could do that, Warrior sure couldn't, then it's failing. And so even fundamentals like rogues simply just didn't have enough armor progression in the course of the game. You kind of started in a brown suit of armor and ended in a purple suit of armor, and it wasn't what you wanted. So we really did put a lot of work into all the classes to make sure that they had their own space. Hands on with the game, they see a big chunk of it, so they kind of get a sense of how the frame narrative works, how a companion would join, and it generally just gives them a nice, cool experience. Get themselves, kind of primed for March 8th when the whole game comes out for all 3 platforms.